Primitive Technology is one of the most popular channels on YouTube, with over 1 billion views, 11 million subscribers, and essentially pioneering an entire genre. But throughout the over 10 years he's been on the platform, there's one question that still no one knows the answer to. Until now. So I'm a big fan of Primitive Technology, but there's always been kind of this air of mystery around his channel. Like, he never says a single word in any of his videos. He just films in this random wilderness. And while some people have tried to figure out where this is, as far as I can tell, no one on the internet has been able to find it. So I thought it'd be a fun challenge to find this and then walk through kind of how I did it. We'll be using sun angles, digital elevation models, regional ecosystem maps, and a bunch more. So if any of that sounds interesting, let's get into it. So the first thing I did was just laid out what sources of information I have. So one, we have, of course, his YouTube videos here. Two is this WordPress blog page that he ran. And three is an Ask Me Anything he did on Reddit, like in 2019-ish. These three are really it. There's no Instagram, there's no Twitter or anything else like that. So on YouTube, in this little FAQ section, he says he's in far north Queensland, Australia. So that's kind of my starting point. Now on the blog, this ran from August 2018 all the way back to July 2015. So for each of these months, it has kind of the video and then the summary, as well as, typically some comments down here for each one where he does respond. So what I did, I went through all like 100 videos, every comment here, and I pulled out what information could have been helpful. Now on one of these posts, in one of these comments way down here it is. Someone asks where his area is, and he responds, it's on an old cane farm, meaning sugar cane. Now that doesn't seem like much, but if you look at where sugarcane grows, it's a very small portion of far north Queensland. Basically over half of it is from this area between Cairns and Townsville. The next thing I used in one of his videos, this cassowary bird comes through, which is kind of like an endangered species. Like, it's pretty rare. So I looked up where this bird actually lives, where its habitat is. And I found this map, which is pretty grainy, but you can see Cairns here. So I put them side by side and they're very different scales. So this is Cairns here on this line and Townsville here. So sugarcane produced in between these a little up, cassowary in between these a little up. This area is out even though it has cassowaries. This area is out because no cassowaries, even though there's sugarcane. So we're between Cairns and Townsville. That's all to say. And I'll actually take a step back if you're not familiar with Australia. So world, Australia, far north Queensland is this point up here. And then what we're talking about specifically is this area from Cairns down here to Townsville. Also in this video from February 2025, he mentions this monsoon season beginning. Googling that, I found this Wikipedia article, which kind of goes over the floods and what areas were affected. So we can see it does say supermarkets in Cairns, Innisfail, and Ingham. So going back to the map, we see Cairns, Innisfail, and Ingham here. So this kind of confirms we're in the right area. So once I had this general area, the next thing I did was just look at each one of these town names plus John Plant plus Primitive Technology, kind of trying different combinations in search and seeing what I would get. So I'll give this example of one of the things I did. Article was published in 2018. It also said that him and his family moved to this house right before he went to high school, meaning they moved to this house in 1995. So that narrowed it down to only houses that were bought in 1995 and not sold since. So again, a couple of things like this combined narrowed it down to pretty select subset of where he could be. But again, all this is his house, which I don't care about. I want to know where are these builds, where are these primitive technology structures that we see in the videos. So that brings me back to this, the three kind of sources of information we have, which is his YouTube channel, his blog page, and this Reddit Ask Me Anything. Now in this Reddit AMA, there were probably hundreds of comments that I read through here, but only one was helpful. And that was this one where someone asked, do you bring any food and water with you from home? And he said, no, the site is about a 15-minute walk from home. So I'm not showing the actual location here, obviously, but this is kind of what I had, which is a house here and then a bunch of flat area that he's obviously not filming in, and then wilderness here. So then I had just started looking, for a hut or a clearing or something that we see in the videos. The problem was the canopy here was just so dense, I couldn't see anything through that. And honestly, this is where the search kind of hit a wall. Let me tell you all the things I tried here. I looked on All Trails, which is a review site for trails where people post pictures. And I looked at probably hundreds of photos from all the trails around this area in case maybe somebody, went off trail and took a picture within this area. Nothing there. I pulled the past 10 years of monthly satellite coverage here to see if maybe I could see like smoke from a fire coming up out of the trees. I checked Strava also to see if anyone ran around or hiked around this area again. I even found the source for crazy high-res satellite imagery. And not only is it just like high resolution, it's also oblique imagery. So they take these pictures from, facing north, facing east, south, all that. So I looked over every square foot of that area on every year they had from every angle, and I didn't see anything. All the things I just said came up empty. I had narrowed the search down from about 100,000 square mile area to less than 1 square mile, but that wasn't good enough. I wanted the exact location. So here's the plan. Any picture from above won't work because I can't see through the trees. And then any picture on the ground won't work because they don't exist. So I need something that's able to see through the trees. Luckily, that exact thing exists, and it's called a digital elevation model. And how it works is you have a plane flying over whatever you want to measure, and it shoots down these photons, or like particles of light. And the time it takes for that photon to reach whatever it hits and bounce back up tells it how far it is away. Now, in a thick forest like we're dealing with, most of these photons are just going to hit trees. But you do this with enough photons at enough different angles, and some of them hit the ground. Then with some algorithms, you can kind of stitch together the ones that hit the ground and get this bare earth elevation map. And in practice, this is what this looks like. So you have all the trees here, you have the point cloud, and then you strip away everything that's not ground, and you're left with this. Now, governments use this type of stuff all the time for things like erosion, monitoring from floods, or research, whatever else. And they typically make this data public. Now, after a bit of searching, I found this geospatial data platform. You just draw a rectangle around whatever area you want, search, and then it'll pull up all of the available data sets. So here we can see the various like digital elevation models, and I just downloaded the highest resolution one. So pulling this into a tool like QGIS, we can visualize this data. So right here we just have regular Google satellite coverage, and then this shows us this digital elevation model that we just downloaded. So now looking in this forest area where the site should be, I can see all of the ground underneath the canopy. Unfortunately, there's no hut, there's no buildings, nothing I could see here. But that actually makes sense when you look at how the model is working. So like right here, we see the house and the trees, and then flipping back over to this model, there's no house, there's no trees. It's just giving us the dirt. So if there were a hut that was captured on this DEM, it would also be flattened just like this house. Okay, so new plan. Instead of looking for a hut, I can look at the terrain features and kind of sketch out what it should look like a terrain fingerprint basically. That'll be this thing up here. And then I take that and I compare it versus the DEM we have and find where it matches, and that can tell us where the location is. Now this turned out to be much harder than I originally thought, mostly because this DEM has a resolution of 0.5 meters. Every half meter here is 1 pixel. So looking at this whole picture is like 8 pixels wide. So I couldn't look for, whatever shape I see in this picture. This is 8 pixels. So what that meant is I needed to look at larger scale terrain features. The problem is he doesn't really show off large areas in his videos. It's usually framed, whatever he's working on, and then maybe a little bit of background like you see here. So I kind of needed to stitch together different areas to build this overall map. So I went through every video, matching up different angles, different tree roots, things like that, and grouping together each area to make this map. Now I'll walk you through kind of how I got to that. And the first and probably most important thing is figuring out which direction we're facing. Like even if I sketched out this entire area, if I don't know which way's north, I can't match it up against anything. So that's what we'll do with this first shot here. You can see the shadows from the things he's holding being cast against this pole here. Later on in the video, the sun angle gets higher, so that tells me this is sunrise and not sunset. So the sun should be coming in roughly from the east. Now we can get a bit more precise by saying this is maybe a 20-30 degree altitude angle. Then I can come to this SunCalc website and kind of dial in that altitude angle, and we get a more exact answer. The reason I say more exact is if I change this from February to something like August, that same altitude angle gives us a much different direction. It's a difference of slightly south of east to almost straight up northeast. Luckily, we can do a little better. This video was posted September 4th. That doesn't mean it was filmed September 4th, but in the description here, he says the project took 102 days. This shot was about halfway through the project, so call it 50 days. 1 to 2 months prior to September 4th, mid-July. So now coming back here for mid-July, at a 25 degree altitude, we're looking about 54 degrees. Now say I was a little bit off and it was actually mid-June for filming. 25 degrees puts us at 52 instead. So now our margin is kind of between here and here rather than this whole swing. So now we have the angle of the sun, and this is a top-down view. So the sun is coming from a little bit northeast. What we need to do now is figure out what orientation this house is in. I'm sure you could get a lot more scientific with this. I'm just looking at this kind of front face here and seeing the sun hits these tiles that he's holding, hits this, and then kind of continues going. So to make this more accurate, it would actually be hitting the front, hitting this post, going off to the right side, hitting this post, going off to the right side here. I can also see here he's kind of on a ridge. So you see the terrain goes down here to the left and to the right. And so he's kind of at the peak of this here. So now we have this sketch where we know north is up, and we have the house sitting on this ridge where, both sides of this go down. Now this next clip we'll use, we're at the same house, but we can see a little bit more of what's to our south. Looking up at the house, we can see there's the back, there's the front, and we're kind of down here in this river where it runs back to front. And now looking at that same area in another video shows that the river actually comes down and curves before continuing to the right. So adding that to our sketch would look something like this. Like we would be standing here looking up at the house, the river running left to right, and we kind of see this curve here. This little bend here before continuing can be seen in the video, and I'll show that part here. Now there's one more area that I want to include, and it's this really flat area with an abrupt incline behind it. Now with the sun angle here in the video date, I can do the same thing we did earlier and kind of sketch out what this area looks like with north being up. Now the last piece of info we'll use is from this same hut, but in a different video. So in that, he was walking away from the front face, and he says the kiln is about 30 meters from the hut near the creek, which is about 5 meters past that. So what this allows us to do is to connect the two sketches we made into kind of one overall view of what this should look like. And so to summarize, we have this original house here kind of on a ridge. So down here, up on the ridge, and then back down. And then this river that curves and then runs northeast. Then south of the river, we have this flat area, followed by an abrupt incline. Now with this sketch in mind, we can actually now begin to search the DEM for this area. And immediately the first thing I noticed was this river that matches the angle perfectly. And zooming in here, it also has this really flat area to the southeast. Now there are a couple bends here that work, but remember we're looking for something that goes up, kind of plateaus, and then continues back down. If I look at each one of these, it's kind of, just stays flat. This one continues going up. There's one here though, that I see this bend, I see it go up, and then it continues back down after. And if I zoom in and you kind of squint and turn your head to the side, you can see this little zigzag pattern here that we have sketched out as well. Coming back to this image, this is where the river curves around and he's kind of standing in this cove here. Now, if he were fully standing here, this looks like about where his head would hit, so call this 2 meters high. So in this shot, he's right to the right of where this river curves. Back on our map, so it would be here, river curving, and then he's standing right here. I can measure the height of that, so that is 55 meter elevation. If I measure the height right here, that's 57 meters. So pretty much spot on for the 2 meter increase we would expect. Also, if I measure the distance from where this hut would be to the river, we should get about 35 meters. So doing that here, the hut should be around the base of this mountain, kind of where it reaches the flat area, and then going to the river, about 37 meters, so pretty close. Also, this whole site is about 290, 300 meters from the road. In the Reddit AMA, he said two things. He said it's a 15-minute walk from home, but he also said it's a 7-minute walk from the road. So like 300 meters in pretty dense forested area, 7-minute walk is totally feasible. And lastly, at the top of the ridge at this hut that we started at, the video shows this pit that he's dug, which is, just below waist height. If I go to that ridge above this bend here, I can see there is a pit dug at the top. With the elevation inside, it's 60.8, and the elevation outside, it's 61.4. This will put the depth right below that waist height that we saw. This DEM was captured in 2018. This pit was dug in 2015. There's another DEM capture from 2013. If I pull that up, we can see the pit's not there, meaning it was created sometime between 2013 and 2018, exactly when and where we'd expect it to be. We found him.